All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to kick things off here. Thank you so much for attending today's session. We're going to talk about making continuous learning an integral part of your engineering culture. My name is Pedro Santana. I'll be your host today in what will be a discussion uh, from involving a couple of gentlemen that I think certainly are examples of successful practitioners of continuous learning. So I'm really excited to bring their experience to you. Um, Thanks to the entire team that put together today's conference. It's been fantastic. Always happy to participate in these events. The entire team has been super supportive, and this has been a really smooth process. So thank you all for that. If you attended today's keynote in the morning, you heard from Dale Ford, President and CEO of Hawkridge Systems, and he spoke about the partnership, the strategic partnership that we've entered into between Hawkridge Systems and Solid Professor. It was great to have him share his experience and perspective on that. I will say that my experience as co-founder, Solid Professor, we've been doing this for a very long time. We're coming up on a year in our partnership, and it's been fantastic to have the support. I'm excited and very optimistic about the things that I think we'll be able to do together that would have been impossible for us to do alone. So I'm excited looking down the road at some of the things that we have planned. But what does this mean for you? As Hawkridge customers, what does this mean for you? Well, for starters, you have access to Solid Professor. In my humble and very biased opinion, I think there's a tremendous amount of value there for you. But I want to talk today about a subject that is broader than Solid Professor, because I think just having access to a resource is not quite enough. And so what you'll find today, I hope, is really valuable advice, again, from people that are exercising this culture of continuous learning. And so that's what I decided we should focus on in this talk. When I do speak on this subject, which I'm always happy to do, I tend to focus on three areas that I think are really vital ingredients at the organization level to really drive a culture of continuous learning. The first of those is an organizational belief that people truly are your most valuable resource. I think you'll find that for all of these are easy words to say, but putting them into practice requires effort. And so not only do we have to recognize that people are our most valuable resource, we also have to recognize that that is not a static thing. It's not something that you just get what you've got and that's it. There's a lot you can do to really drive that. And I'm hoping that today during our discussion, we'll talk about some of those topics. Providing a learning-friendly environment, I think, is one of those really difficult things to make come to life. Again, easy to say, but when the rubber hits the road, it's one of the things that tends to fall off of the priority list. So again, we'll get some insights on that from today's panelists. And then finally, it takes work. You have to be proactive. You have to have intention to not only build programs built around learning, but then in maintaining that momentum that you've built. So these are the key areas that I want to focus on, that I tend to focus on in many of my presentations. But today I decided, okay, let's take a step back and have others that are actually doing it talk to you and share their experience. So I will be guiding our conversation initially with my own questions, but truly what's important here today is that you get what you expect out of today's talk, out of today's discussion. So what I'd like to do is to have you think right now, before we even dive in, and think about what it is that you want to take away from today's session. Assume for a second that Tim and Ed, who'll be joining us shortly, are going to be a treasure trove of fantastic advice for you. What would you ask them? Think about that now. And what I would invite you to do is to capture those questions you may have and put them in the Q&A panel. So on the top right of your screen, you should have a little flyout panel, and it's got a Q&A section there. Please add your questions there. Do it now. Take 30 seconds. Think about what it is that you want to make sure you have answered today. And to encourage you, I will I've been given authority, let's put it that way, to give you some additional raffle entries for some really cool prizes at today's event for whomever happens to add the first question into chat and maybe a couple of others a little bit later. I said chat. Definitely put it in the Q&A panel. It's much more beneficial there. Okay, so with that, let's meet our panelists. I've invited, and I'm very happy that they accepted, both Ed and Tim from Edwards Lifesciences. I call them, kind of the poster child for how to really drive these programs around continuous learning. I happen to know that there have been some significant achievements there in their programs. Some of the metrics that I decided to share with you here are around participation. Believe it or not, these 224 participants all are under the guise of a pilot program to get solid professor learning initiatives going at Edwards. That has resulted in just under 50,000 lesson views in the platform. And more importantly, has delivered some real outcomes in the form of CSWA certifications. At last check, and maybe we'll get some updates today, 33 CSWAs earned, along with 7 CSWPs. And again, I know that progress is being made even beyond that. So to meet the team, let me ask both Ed and Tim if you guys would be so kind as to join me on camera. That would be fantastic. All right.
It worked.
Yes, there you are, Tim and Ed. Let's see. And Ed, I can hear you as well, correct?
Yes.
Say a couple things. Fantastic. All right, gentlemen. Well, we're going to kick things off here. Before I proceed, let me just for a second give you a bit of an introduction to our audience. We have a cross-section of engineers, certainly CAD users, admins, managers, all joined together with by an interest for learning generally. And all throughout the day, they're going to be participating in highly technical sessions. This one here is focused on learning. So I think we've got good representatives of what we would call our crowd, people that really value learning and are here to learn more about that. So with that, let me turn it over to you guys and ask you to introduce yourselves. And starting with you, Ed, if you would give me maybe a bit more information about your role at Edwards and kind of how long you've been at Edwards.
Yeah, sure thing, Pedro. And thanks for having me be a part of this. And looking forward to the discussion. And I hope that it becomes a dialogue. So my name is Ed from Edwards Lifesciences. Been here for about 6 years. I'm currently the learning segment leader for engineering and specifically around technical skill sets. Now, I have to give a little bit of context too, right? I've had 20 plus years of experience in biotech, medtech, academia. I'm a chemist by trade in chemical engineering as well. Did a lot of R&D work across that space, a lot of project management, but taught at a college for a while. And so interlaced throughout that career has been a passion for development, professional development, training other engineers. And so my current role is basically around, as a segment lead for engineering, is consulting, being a strategic partner with our units within Edwards Lifesciences in terms of making sure that the capabilities we have from a technical standpoint are readily available to meet the needs of the business. And at the end of the day, that need is for patients. And so that's what Edwards Lifesciences is about. So that's a little bit about myself. And
thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, nice to have people know a little bit more about who they've got here on today's panel. Tim, very nice to see you again. If you would please
Yes.
let the audience know a little bit about your background and your role at Edwards.
Well, the only thing that I have in common with Edmund is that I've been here 6 years. So him and I are about the same time. I am in engineering. I'm in the product development side of it. And what kind of brought me here was I've been doing this for a little over 40 years. And I've been aware of Edwards for about 30 years. And I've been doing consulting and just kind of watching them. And I'm towards the end of my career, and I decided to become an employee, get benefits and those things, but also to give back, to share, to mentor, to take that information of so many different experiences and situations that I've been really blessed to have, and then just kind of come over and help develop others. And I am in the transcatheter heart valve (THV) group, and kind of, I don't know if you know a little bit about what Edwards is doing, but we're dealing with heart issues and heart valve replacement and repair. And so it's kind of neat because we're really patient focused, and we have such a big impact on that. And the neat thing about this culture and the things that we have here is that, patient first, but also the employee and development is very, very important. So I've been really lucky to not only be able to design product, but to also develop others in bringing up new talent to kind of take my place as I move on. So.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. We're going to dive into so much of that. And I'm glad you mentioned a little bit about what you do at Edwards. I had the opportunity, and actually you guided me on a tour when I visited, and it's truly breathtaking, the work that's being done there. So if you haven't, please, I would encourage you to visit their website and just kind of see what they're up to. It's life-saving. It's fantastic. Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your introductions. Let's dive in. Earlier, I laid out those 3 characteristics that I frequently observe in organizations that I think not only embrace the idea of continuous learning, but more importantly, they have figured out a way to really bring that idea to life. There are many other factors. Those 3 stand out to me, so I'd like to use them as a guide for today's conversation. So I'll be asking you some questions that kind of fall into those categories, starting first with that idea that people are your most valuable resource. And what I'd like to do, Ed, is start with you. So many companies will speak to that idea of truly valuing people as that most valuable resource. I will say that often they struggle when it comes to turning that belief into something that is actually felt by people that are part of the organization. Do they actually believe that in their day-to-day experience? Do they see it? Based on my interactions with you and your team, I think you guys have done a really good job of this. So can you talk to us about some of the ways that Edwards conveys that philosophy to the team? How do you bring that to life?
Yeah, that's a big question, I think, and I hope we can have some dialogue with that and back and forth. But the first thing that comes off the top of my head is it's nice, and I speak from experience only at Edwards Lifesciences and from my past experience at other med tech and biotech, is that we have a leadership that is bought in on understanding the word innovation requires people. And I know with a lot of the future trends in diversity, inclusion, and belonging, collaboration, all those those buzzwords, those hold true to Edwards Lifesciences, and ensuring that the leaders are developing, and I can't say that we're the experts in the field of this area in terms of where people are our organization's most valuable resource. But the effort is there, the intention is there, right? And so managers are being trained to have those conversations with their employees. Whether it's developing an individual development plan each year, it's like, hey, what's 1 or 2 things that in your role that you can get better at, or that can push you to the next level, right? It's having those type of discussion. And then on top of that, right? So it's about the leaders. It's about being bought in to that culture of learning, but also the way that it's structured, the organization is structured. If there isn't an intention to build up people, then you got to have the roles to help support that. So hence my role, right? And as a talent segment leader, usually, right, in organizations, you see a learning and development person, and it's just one person, doing many hats, or having many hats. For us, I'm focused on the engineering segment, and it's a critical segment. We have other folks who are focusing on clin and reg, finance, IT, And we have a support team of instructional designers. So we're getting there, right? But it's been a journey to get to this point. Right. So
yeah, that's a key insight. I'm glad you shared that about having that support structure. I think that that's often an area that, it seems like a leap enough just to get resources in front of people. But now you're telling me that we also have to have support infrastructure around that. Like, it starts to make that project seem bigger. But it's definitely necessary. Along those lines, Tim, if I can ask you, when you and I first met, you spoke really highly about Edwards support for continuous learning. Obviously, I was there representing solid professors, so you probably thought I wanted to hear that too. But no, I really thought you were being very genuine. And I remember you describing how different that was compared to organizations that you've been a part of in the past. What I'm curious about, because you're kind of on the receiving end of everything that Ed just talked about, is, can you share some of those experiences, if you can think back to those early days there, things that you actually experienced that made you feel and appreciate Edwards' commitment to learning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yes, and having 40 plus years of experience, I've experienced being a employee. I've experienced being a independent contractor, as well as being an owner of a engineering company for over 20 years. So I've kind of played those different things, and I've experienced a lot of different companies and situations within that. And remembering back, most of my continuous learning, we didn't have internet. We actually went to the library and got a book, opened a book up, and and also there were classes, but many times those classes were through your local college. It wasn't through the employer per se. So it was very limited, and most of I would say my learning was on the job. It was looking for those mentors, and we didn't really even talk about them being mentors like we do here at Edwards. We have mentoring programs here as well, but I would search out that expert, and I would have that on-job learning type thing, and that was most of that wasn't done during my time on the job. It was done after hours. So coming here and seeing what Edwards has done, and Ed has mentioned about building this support structure for talent development and for developing of the employees. We have a Edwards University, which maybe Ed might share a little bit more on. And we have relationships with other universities. So we have quite a catalog of resources and classes. And it's also not just focused on, let's say, engineering, but it's on personal development as far as how do we deal with people? How do we deal with, how do we do presentations? So there's so many different aspects that you can choose from. And it's not just that they have those in a catalog, but we're encouraged. And as Ed kind of shared, our managers get with us and what are those things we're going to work on this year? And we come up with a focused plan and having those resources. And that has been something I haven't seen. And I'm mentoring a lot of younger people. Everybody's younger than me, but I don't feel that way, but they are. But anyway, but it's funny because they're wondering, did I go too quickly? Should I have waited? And is it greener on outside on the other side? But I've got to say, this is probably the best company that I've worked for as far as development and putting the employees and their growth at such a high level that I have to tell them, no, it's not greener. You can go out and find out if you want, but I think that you'll quickly realize that the things that we're doing here are very beneficial for growth and for development. And it's just a great experience.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing those details, because again, these are the bits and pieces that I think are overlooked when it comes to having that intentionality about making people feel like this program exists, the company's behind it, everyone's in support. Like that has to be done so that it can be experienced. So I'm glad I got to hear from both of you on that. And maybe to continue that conversation and shifting topics slightly to the idea of the organization's role in providing that learning-friendly environment. Again, this is one that I think is an easy one to say, and yet quite difficult to make it come to life. So Tim, as I alluded to before, you've been a champion for the use of Solid Professor at Edwards. That's how we met. But I know, and I think you know, that simply providing access to a resource just isn't enough. Can you tell us how Edwards has taken on the challenge of getting people to engage, not just with Solid Professor, but just learning in general?
Yeah, I think that is because, yeah, we can give them something, and that's one of the challenges, and we'll get into a little deeper about this pilot program with Solid Professor that we did, and how do we engage people, and how do we measure it? And one of the things that we're trying to do too is build community. We have probably over 600 to 800 users, and we are a mixed environment. We have SolidWorks and we have Creo, and they're, I wouldn't say equally divided, but many are using both systems, but most of what we're finding is people coming in from the colleges are trained in SolidWorks and they're familiar with SolidWorks. And so how do we get that to where we send them out for training, they come back, and then what do you do with it? And part of the issue that we had too is, building this culture, building this community. And as kind of Ed alluded to too, it comes from above, and it's building that culture. It's building that character that we want to be the best that we can. So with the tools, so one of the things that we did was way to measure it, way to get people to kind of go through is the way that you've got the lesson plans or the path, these paths laid out. And we found through certification that we were able to really get people engaged, and it's something that we can measure as well, because there's lessons, there's a test at the end, and then there's also taking the next step is getting the certification through SolidWorks. So and then also it's just, there's other things that they can learn. So it's not just the SolidWorks, it's DFM, there's GD&T, there's other aspects. So and these are areas that we're moving into as a company. So this gives them tools that that they can use on an as will type thing, where they have a media need and they can look that up. So really encouraging them to do that. And we've got so many things that we're doing to try to engage people, and that's through sharing tips and tricks and showing them there's a whole bunch of little things, but you can go in there. If you go through and you start poking around, you're going to find these things, these little nuggets. So it's really trying that engagement, but it's also just kind of building that community and this culture. And it's like a user group, but in a company scale. And we're a very large company, and so we have a lot of resources and building champions. And I think there's a lot of competition within our company too. People are getting their black belts, their green belts, their the different things like that, degrees and things like that. So and it's, once again, that's playing back to that culture.
And I think that's the key term. We talk about a culture of continuous learning, not just doing continuous learning. Like it truly has to be cultural if you're going to be able to sustain your programs. So I'm glad you've spoken to that. Ed, to follow up with you, you're on the learning side of things presently. I know your background is in engineering, but you're currently on the learning side of things. And an interesting conversation I recently had with someone that came from that side, more broadly from the human resources side, was that they oversaw professional development for the organization. And I remember her sharing that the engineering team in particular, and she highlighted them, consistently ranked lower than other teams across all types of learning activity engagement. There are many theories as to why. We had a great conversation about it, but I'm just curious, from your perspective, especially because you're focused on engineering, do you find that you have to take a different approach that maybe some of your colleagues who work with other groups are taking?
Right. I'm actually curious about your your contact, what type of organization that is. For us at Edwards Life Sciences, there's pretty strong engagement. Now,
Good.
let me put into context how Edwards is comprised of. So within Edwards, we have, think of 5 mini sub companies
Okay.
within that are focused on, that have different portfolios addressing different needs of structural heart diseases. And so there's different, it's a different ecosystems within this greater ecosystem. And I can tell you that there are some business units that will, uh, buy in and are all in into this. And then on the flip side, to your contact's point, is that uh, there's some hesitation, and and I think a lot of us, those who are engineers, we have deadlines, milestones, deliverables that we have to make for our products, and that gets in the way, right? But um, it's it's really about, and that's where my role comes into play. It's having that engagement. And it's like, hey, what are your needs for the business? How can we help? Right? I want to share a story. Um,
Please.
well, Tim and I, we've, especially with Solid Professor. Okay, so we both sat last year when Solid Professor came on board. We had a conversation with a leader in one of the business units. Say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. We can upskill your employees on this particular skill set that that is growing. Each year over year, it's changing, and he didn't get it right until it took a while, but to have him understand that by upskilling your folks in product design through SolidWorks or whatnot and GD&T, you'll be set up, right? But this person is more traditional, said, yeah, I only need 1 or 2, 3 to be able to do this, right? So a lot of it is educating leaders about the needs. So yeah, that's
That's
it
good
from there.
perspective. Yeah. And by the way, very diplomatic of you to highlight that some teams are hesitant. I think you. Yes, I've experienced it certainly. And actually, it just so happens that through our regular chat, not through the Q&A panel, but through our regular chat, Nathan was asking how to kind of create that corporate buy-in for large learning initiatives. Not that we're at the Q&A session yet, but I think you spoke very closely to that subject. Is there more there that you can talk about? And I'm not even sure if you guys came in. In fact, I'm fairly confident that you came into an organization that already had what I would call corporate buy-in. I'm imagining, but maybe not. Speak to that if you would.
I don't think so, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that.
Okay,
There was some
great.
work done.
There's predecessors from my end, leaders that have left the company who have shared their passion. I think it's education to get the buy-in is educating of what learning does, continuous learning does. If you are striving to be a learning organization, the return on investment you get is not only attraction from other talent from outside, but also engagement, right? And there's tons of research around this, and I'm not going to get into those numbers or that data. But then also retention, right? And for us as an innovative company, we want to retain our talent, knowing that they have trade secrets. They know how to make things that other companies don't. And so why not? And is to be able to meet the needs of the person and really have a discussion. For managers, have a discussion. What do you need? What do you want to do? And then let's make an opportunity for you to apply it. Right. And so those conversations have to happen, right, Tim? Like, or else it's a moot point, like trying to sell, a learning program within our company. It's not going to make any sense if they don't know why and for what. And it's those grander schemes of attention. So to Nathan's question, and it really is phasing little by little, getting quick wins. Solid professor, really, really big one across the R&D business units.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And I remember those meetings that you and I had with top leaders. And as you said, some were just kind of all in. They understood it, seen it, and there's others that were kind of new to it or didn't realize maybe that they had a need for this, that there was a problem, or there was a gap. And but yet I'll have to say that that one group now is right up there with our strongest. They are big advocates, and it's huge. What a difference when we do have that upper management buy-in and the awareness of this. But it took some success. It took some ground roots, the coming up and filtering up. And I think it's gaining momentum, but it wasn't just like, that sounds great, let's go. It took some work.
Great. No, I want to go a little bit towards, given the time that we have today and how great this conversation is going, I want to make sure that, as I said before, that our audience gets an opportunity to get advice directly for what they're interested in. So the very first question in here is from Joe. I think if I click answer and publish, you guys will be able to see the question somewhere. But the idea is, or the question is, what are some techniques you can suggest for affecting cultural changes toward prioritizing people and continuous learning in organizations where that might not be a significant priority? So I think we've hit on some of that subject, but he has kind of a follow-up, which is specifically from the perspective of someone who might have limited influence. How do you impact the strategic direction of a large organization? Any advice for Joe?
That is a good one, because I think that's where I came in. I came in with limited resource or influence, and by finding the right person, which was Ed, was able to take it and then take it in a way that it could be rolled out or be presented in a way that was more understandable, and just having a plan, a much better plan. And I think that was a key thing to the success of this. Is I had a passion. I started, I found it. And I'll get into a little bit more of this in another question, but I think finding that person to help you be a champion, to help champion this, it's hard. It takes a little bit more than one person. So it's finding that resource, finding that person.
Can I piggyback off of that, Pedro?
Please do. Yeah, go for it.
I love that question with Joe, because it reminded me of my earlier career of trying to establish programs within other companies. And to Tim's point, sometimes we're not fortunate to have an infrastructure within the organization to help support learning and development. But it's finding those other champions that are willing to speak up and to sort of push it up the ladder in a way, and a opportunity to present the opportunity. So yeah, answer to your question, Joe, I think it's what Tim said. It's working just bite-sized pieces and just committed to it. If you really believe in it and are passionate about it, it will seep through.
Let me follow that up with something that you actually mentioned already, Ed, but I'd like to find out how you overcome this challenge. And as you said, we're engineers, we have projects, we have deadlines. It's inevitable in my experience that there will be these two initiatives will come to a head. They're going to compete for the same amount of time. And I'm just curious how you as an organization, you as a learning team, from either of you actually, how do you handle that? How do you not let that constant pressure crush learning as an initiative?
That's a tough one, and that's the reality, right, of a lot of organizations. I'll tell you this. This is a conversation I had earlier this year with another VP of a business unit. I'll just say this leader is very slightly resistant. I'll say slightly resistant to learning and development, right? And but I asked this leader this question: do you believe you have the right skill sets in the next 2 to 3 years to meet your business objectives? You know, can you put out this product to market with your current workforce, knowing that skill sets? This leader didn't like slowly understanding that the half-life of skill sets is diminishing. New skills are being popped up once every year, once every 2 years, and me asking that question, it led to a long pause. And usually, this leader has some stuff to say right away. And so the thought of is posing those questions, right? It goes back to the other things is the education, and is asking the right questions. Do you have what you need? And now I can say it's not a solid professor thing, but with this leader, but now it's okay. Let's create a certification program where we can build up cloud computing, machine learning, AI skills, and that can be a legacy for this leader to impart. And he was attracted to that, right? So it's kind of appealing to on a personal level and on a business level, and I think that has worked. And so again, not perfect on my end with some of the things going on, but work in progress.
That's a great approach. Yeah. Great approach. And speaking of kind of figuring out how to talk to people in ways that resonate with them in terms of value and things that they, legacy, for example, that's a very powerful one. Maybe a little bit, I guess, more tangible. And I'll go to you first, Tim, on this one, which is Alex has asked a question here about resources around showing or demonstrating ROI for continuous education. We're in largely numbers-driven technical organizations where the numbers kind of they tell the story, right? So I imagine, and I know that we had conversations about this early on, like how do you address the question of ROI when it comes to continuous education?
Yeah, and that's really key, because before we can go on to next year and continue on, we got to assess our failures and our successes for that year. And so we have to have something measurable, and that's what managements want to see. They want to see, okay, we've got you 250 licenses of this. How are they being used? What are you seeing? Are they making the impact that you had hoped, or what have you? So one of the things that we do is we obviously we can see it, and when people get certified, we can see by the success that they have with it, as far as those scores, the struggles they may have going through that process, but also we're able to look at what are the things they're looking at, what are the lessons, what are the information that they're pulling up more often, what are those things they're searching for. And we had a meeting earlier about these reports that we get once a week, and we're able to take those reports and see what are people doing with the program, because it charts everything, and then we can kind of look at that. It's also the feedback that we get from our users. We have surveys, we have check-in sessions, and we're listening to what people are saying, and we're documenting this. So when we're rolling up, and we're getting them to roll up the end of our program for this year at the end of October, November, and putting that together so we can present it to management of what we found this year. But a lot of it is the input that we get back from the users. We're also getting it from the managers. So we are reaching out to the managers too, and just kind of asking them, what are they seeing? And that's been very telling.
Yeah, like with Solid Professor, we created this community of practice. We didn't want to say, hey, here's Solid Professor, run with it, learn something. Yep. No, we created this whole community of product designers across Edwards globally, so that we can say, hey, we got to learn from one another, and we got to share knowledge with one another, because that's an issue. Yep. That knowledge transfer across a big company.
And a lot of tribal knowledge.
Yeah, yep. A lot of tribal, but now we can share. And so we want ROI, we want quantitative metrics, right? And sure. there's ways around that, and I can go really deep into that, but that's the whole other breakout session. However, it's like Tim said, is including the managers in that community of practice, that they can say, wow, okay, this is what I definitely need this person wants that, I can direct them to this community. They can get a solid professional license, or maybe it's something else. We're trying to build up on this program.
Got it. There's a question I saw come through here that I think is related, that we can either answer as closely as we can to a direct answer, but more importantly, I think it'll help kind of tie together some topics, which is asked by Mike. He asked, what % of an employee's time should go to learning? And the reason I know it would be difficult to answer that is because I'm sure it'll be different for a lot of people. But what I'm curious about is, have you guys as an organization thought about that, and how do you allow for it?
For sure. I'll start first, Tim. You can
Yeah.
provide some lens from your stance. Is, we hear in the learning profession, you hear about that 70-20-10, right? 70%, education, 20%, like a little bit of exposure and experience. We're trying to get away from that model. I think there's a balance, knowing that a lot of the true learning happens on the job, and we all know that, right? And so it's integrating the learning within the work. And so those are the type of programs that I'm trying to build. But if you had to put a small percentage to it, if you want to say, it's saying that education-wise, in classroom, self-paced learning, that's like 10%, right?
Yeah.
And things are changing so much, and so we need to be learning on the fly, and so we need to integrate that into the work. And so those are conversations I have with the leaders. How can this person learn this without even going to a classroom setting? Do we have the right mentors? Do we have the right coaches? Maybe it's creating space for them to talk about those things.
Absolutely.
So my little.
For sure. And Tim, you had some to add to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that is something, and part of what we've talked about is kind of, we don't like to use the word required, but we encourage them to put to maybe 2 to 4 hours a week, and I think 2 hours is pretty reasonable. So 8 hours a month, let's say, of invested in this, and it kind of feeds itself, but setting aside that time, and not necessarily during the work hours. They can do it, after. They can do it whenever. But just that to build that thirst for learning, for knowing, and learning something new every day, and just encouraging that. And I think that's part of the culture here. And so it really helps us to have that. To start that, but we don't like to use that word required, because it's very difficult. Last year we had the lockdown. We all got sent to our rooms, and actually it was pretty good for the program, because it really got people to really develop, and until we figured all this thing out. So we got a really good head start, through the lockdown, that we were able to give people something to expand in, while they're kind of waiting to see how everything was going to work out on this.
Yeah, I remember when you I forget exactly how I learned about this, that you were taking that opportunity of everyone having to be remote to really get them engaged in learning as kind of an immediate go-to that would create value still. We shouted that from the rooftops after we heard it from you, to everyone, that was in our contact lists. So I really appreciated that. You mentioned earlier, Tim, about the mentor program that you have, and Chase and Claire both submitted questions that have to do with mentoring and maybe advice on how to start a mentoring program. I think they both recognize, based on their questions, the value that has had for them. So yeah, any suggestions on how to create such a program, maybe how it works for you? I don't know, anything you want to share around the idea of mentorship?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because it's interesting. It is not an Edwards program. It is a ground roots user developed. We did get buy-off for management on it, but it's not run by Edwards. It's run by individuals that have a passion for this, and it's usually I think it's a 9-month commitment, and we try to pair people up. And the interesting thing is, I have a number of mentees. They're not in engineering.
Oh, interesting.
They're the resources. One of the neat things is they really value emotional intelligence here, which I have that. I don't have much other intelligence, but I got some of that emotional intelligence. So thank goodness I'm in a company that has value for that. But it's really kind of as a young person and dealing with situations, maybe I don't really enjoy what I'm doing at this moment. And how do I deal with it? How do I deal with a difficult situation? And just life type things. So it's interesting that, the two people I do have, they're not in engineering. I do have some people in engineering as well. But I do have in other groups, and they're one is in marketing, and the other young lady is in sourcing. And it's just finding, people. And this is a ground roots thing. There isn't a lot of rules. They kept it that way. It's something that's been going on for about 6 years, I think. And it was just started by one of the engineers here. He's seen a need for it, and it's kind of developed. So it's kind of a ground roots type thing.
That's
And
fantastic. Yeah.
it's a fantastic program.
Yeah, so
Really is.
there's programs like that within Tim's business unit, and then there are formal ones. Is just around the leadership, business interpersonal skills type of mentoring. Now we're slowly trying to build up that for the technical side. So I can say one example is, last year I reached out to different nominated folks across the business units, technical subject matter experts, asking them, hey, survey, do you have a passion for learning and development? Are you willing to share, maybe like how much time are you willing to share each month, of doing knowledge transfer, coaching, whatnot? And it is surprising, like, to share how much, that people are willing to share their time to coach, to mentor. And so out of that data, I created this unofficial technical learning community, right? And it's a centralized repository of people who are willing to share their knowledge. And so back to Tim's point about grassroots, man, that's the way to go, right? You can cut through a lot of the layers of
Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned along there that you did get management buy-in. Tell me, what is the form of management buy-in? Like, how does that manifest? Is it simply as easy as just we're okay with you having time blocked off in your calendar for this? Is it that simple, or is there more that management supplies this program with, or these initiatives with? Like, what are you actually getting from management or leadership to support this program?
That I'm not sure of all the detail, because I was not involved in starting it or managing it, what have you. I'm just part of it. But I know that it was mentioned to me that, the management is 100% behind it, because we do block out time, and it's usually time during the day, our work day, a half hour. And it depends on the people, but usually it's once every 2 weeks.
Got it.
And
I mean, even
just
that
kind of a check-in. So I think it's a reasonable. We have speakers. We have management come in and speak about their background, their challenges they have to get where they're at. We have speakers from outside. So it's kind of neat. So it's just been embraced, I think, by the company as a whole. But what that looked like to get it to that point, I'm not sure about. I just think we have management that realizes the value of people with experience and being able to pass that on to others.
Excellent. No, thank you for that. And even the ability for you, Ed, to be able to send out that broadcast to say how much time are you, and to have people respond with that, and knowing that management's not going to look at that and say, "Whoa, what? You're going to spend time doing what?" That's I think where that it's one of those moments where that rubber really does hit the road, right? Like, are you going to get any pushback? It sounds like you don't. So that's fantastic. We're just about out of time. So I want to throw this one question out at you that I think we can hopefully cover in a minute or less, which is about incentives. Let's see. Jason asks, what are some of the best incentives you've used for motivating teammates to pursue further learning? And I guess my underlying question is, do you find that you have to, or how does the incentive idea fit into driving learning initiatives for you?
I'll touch briefly on this one. I don't think there's incentives in terms of, monetary those type of incentives. Well, what we're focusing on is like, hey, we're a culture of learning. Every year, each employee has their individual development plans. There's a metric on that throughout the organization. So what you're trying to measure can dictate behavior, right? And so if you want learning to happen, everyone has to have something on their individual development plan, and that's a metric that gets communicated to leadership, right? So that's my simple answer. Tim?
Got it.
Oh no, I think that's it right there. You nailed it.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I can't believe this went by as fast as it did. I was concerned that we were, not going to be able to fill the time with our discussion, and I will say there's many subjects we didn't even get to touch on. I do, as we wind down here, want to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you to the two of you. It's been fantastic having you here. And I really dug the format. I think we've got to take this show on the road, maybe a podcast or something in our future. I don't know. This was great. This was a lot of fun. But
I definitely need more time for this.
I want to thank you for participating in this. Attendees, thank you so much for being here. It truly warms my heart that people are interested in learning as its own topic. I think that's fantastic. I do want to say that I've got my email address in here. I've shared this slide just so you can see my email address. If you've submitted questions and we didn't get to them, and they're topics that we didn't talk about, I will follow up with you. If you have questions specific to Ed or Tim, send them my way. I'll make sure that they make their way to them, and relay those across. I think that's about what we have time for today. So again, thank you to everybody. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Tim, Ed, it's been a pleasure. We'll talk again very shortly, I'm sure. Thank you, everybody, for stopping in.